Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you are. I hope you're having a good one. Episode 2 of Sitting In is about to kick off with Mr. Jack Handyside. Jack is a really incredible guitar player and teacher from just outside of London. And this was a really interesting, insightful conversation for me. So I hope you enjoy it. All right, Jack, how's it going, man?
It's going good, man. How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's exciting to have you here on the podcast. I'm not sure what number you're going to be. Like, I've definitely got number 1 recorded, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
But
I might be number 2.
you could be a number 2. But then again, maybe we'll be number 3. Who knows?
Okay, yeah, sure. We'll have the pecking order up. It's up to you.
Yeah, sweet, man. All right, so tell me, what's happening with you? What are you working on? Where's your music at? What's been happening in Jack's world?
In Jack's world, it's been an interesting time. It seems to be the case. Like, I always wonder if it's a personal experience for me or if it's being echoed for a lot of people. But a lot of people, when they kind of graduate, they go into that place of not really knowing where their music career is going to go. So for me, the kind of past, I suppose, 18 months really has been just trying out a lot of things. And the thing that I found most success with at the moment has been teaching. More than anything else, it's been producing lots of different either pieces of content or things that have kind of drawn people in for a lot of online lessons or lessons in person as well. So it's been experience teaching in a way that I'm just teaching all kinds of people from all ages, young professionals, some semi-professionals. That seems to be the kind of thing that's has been going on most. I mean, there's been a couple function gigs here and there and that sort of thing, but it seems to be that teaching is really the way forward for me at the moment. I'm just kind of riding that out and just trying to take as much experience from it as possible. But
Yeah, man, sweet.
That's what's going on.
Yeah, first of all, how's the connection for you? Is that all right?
Connection is fine, yeah.
All right, sweet. So when you're in uni, did you think that's the way it was going to go?
Not really. I mean, I think it's hard as a freelancer and an artist because, I mean, I make no kind of qualms about it. That is essentially what you'll be doing as an artist. You know, whether you're I don't know, maybe you're a dance instructor or you're a musician or you're a painter, fine art, or that kind of thing. You're going to have to do freelance at some point, or maybe your business is built on that model. So you kind of have to take whatever work is coming your way, which is a great thing, and it's also a scary thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and this is why I mentioned, like, my experience is echoed with a lot of my, I suppose, contemporaries, as it were, or people who are kind of in the same position as me. Is that it seems to be that a lot of people are just kind of just seeing where the journey of post graduation takes them. So sometimes that's teaching or performing or writing. So yeah, it's an interesting time, but I think I completely avoided your question there as well.
No, you got it, man. That was sweet. It's like you told me what you've been up to, and you've been teaching a lot. But yeah, there's so much other things that you do. Is because we had a great chat last time, and I was just like, oh wow, you do that as well, and this and this. So why don't you just tell? Because not everybody has these chats with you and I every week. So why don't you just tell the listeners, if anybody's gonna listen, hopefully, like, what else do you do? Because you don't just teach. You told me about very interesting session work you've been doing, and I'm not sure how much you're allowed to talk about that. But just why don't you introduce yourself and be like, all right, this is how I got into music. This is where I went. This is what I'm doing now. Just go for it.
Okay, that's great.
I'll sip my coffee.
Sure. Okay. Well, you give me the eyes to say not those eyes, the eyes to say, hey, you're telling your entire life story. So
you're right.
Okay. So for me getting into music, it's quite funny because I didn't really go through a lot of the process that everyone kind of else around me seemed to have gone through. They either went off to conservatoires or that sort of thing. So for me, music started in the classical realm when I was very young, and I'd started playing a lot of kind of classical guitar music. Obviously, your guitar is rested on your left knee, and well, your right knee if you're a left-handed player. But besides the point, and that was the style of guitar that I was learning at the time. And I was very young, and it wasn't really something that I was completely enthusiastic about for a long time until I was maybe 12 or 13, really, and I started discovering my own music. Just being able to take I suppose it was anything. It was just basic stuff like Jason Mraz stuff, and I suppose some of the early John Mayer stuff as well, and just trying to figure out how can I take those from the recordings and play them for myself, or transcribe them. I suppose it was early transcription for me.
Nice.
And I suppose like the more that you go down that path, the more that you start to discover what it is that's intriguing about music for you, or makes you want to further study it, or dig into it. So for me, it was I suppose understanding it really. It was kind of from an academic part. So I kind of stuck with the classical thing, and I still have, and it's funny because it's kind of made a bit of a resurgence for me, and it's become a really big part of my playing now. But I've kind of gone through all the different genres and settled upon jazz being the main thing, I suppose. So I must have been about 15 or 16. I mean, there's always jazz in the house, which is great, mum and dad and grandparents always playing that stuff. So I was hearing Coltrane and Keith Jarrett and those guys, Sonny Stitt and Cannonball Adderley, from a really young age, not understanding it necessarily, but it was obviously there in my subconscious. So that when I came about to finally wanting to learn that stuff, it was there, and I was intrigued by it, and so it's quite a nostalgic music, I suppose, for me. But yeah, I was about 15 or 16, and I started really kind of digging into it properly, and getting some jazz tutors and that sort of thing, and just going out to sessions to hear guys play, and picking up a lesson here and there from whoever I thought was, at the time just killing on the scene. So I did that, and I eventually went off to university, where it was a mixed time, because there wasn't really a sturdy jazz course for me. So a lot of it was kind of trailblazing on what I wanted to do in the course. And the course was very much like, well, whatever you want to do, we'll facilitate. And there were a few other guys at the time who were feeling the same. So London was a great place for me to kind of go off and really dig my heels into jazz properly, and get into all the parts of it and all the proper learning. So I was taking lessons with a lot of conservatoire tutors and that sort of thing, and that was good for me. And it's kind of led me to where I am today, which is able to balance playing I suppose it's like function stuff or jazz functions or that sort of thing, my own music as well, with teaching, and being able to kind of push that forward. And I think the nice thing is like, once that world is opened up to you, they all seem to open up to you, which is fantastic. So once you're kind of in the jazz realm, the classical realm kind of opens up to you in a different light, or whatever you want to call it, the fusion, which is a funny term. The fusion realm opens up, or I suppose hip hop is now the other thing that's really making a resurgence in terms of like amalgamating jazz and those kind of concepts. But for me, what I'm seeing now is that all those skills rolled into the musician that I am today, means that I'm quite open to doing session work, musical stuff. I suppose my teaching has opened up to that as well. Course creation. So it's very interesting. So my kind of homestead right now is teaching, but as you've kind of pointed out, we've been talking about session work, which is something in the past, I suppose I'd probably call it about a year and a half. Really, it's been another kind of part of my attention. It's been interesting to kind of hone skills and to go back on things and really refine sound. So it's quite nice that the office changes all the time, and I suppose that's part of the reason that people want to do freelance as well. Is an office that changes is interesting, and your colleagues change as well. So I don't think it's for everyone, but for me at the moment, it seems to be stimulating and interesting enough that I want to kind of pursue it and continue and see where it's going. So as much as I can really talk about what's going on, I'm not necessarily under contract or anything like that, but I suppose there is like a respect to what the artist wants to be seen. But I seem to be kind of traveling down to London for the time being, working with some labels here and there, some artists in kind of like writing or producing, I suppose it is really, space of the studio, which has been great, just meeting engineers, producers, all those kind of people. And then I obviously have the teaching world. So seeing the two is great, because I can pull experiences that I have either on the stage or in the studio, and facilitate the kind of learning or information that those who want to go into that sort of realm, like I did when I was young, want to. And I've kind of got that skill to be able to teach it, at least, or to push people in the direction that I was kind of wondering about. So I suppose that's how I'd kind of sum it up. Yeah. But yourself,
Great, that cough. Sorry?
I know. Sorry, go on. You were saying.
Oh, I was saying that cough was not a sign to stop. I just wanted to clear my throat.
It's okay. I was looking in the eyes anyway, and they didn't
Yeah.
indicate anything. So
I've actually just got a couple of things I want to ask about that
sure,
because
yeah.
I think you're totally, at least in my, from my perspective, you're totally right in saying that it's not the normal way people potentially got into music. And I think what I found so interesting, and I find so interesting when I hear you play, is that I can tell that jazz has been the largest part of like your playing. At least that's what I hear. In a very mature way. I don't mean that like, you're jazzy. It's like, no, you understand the music. And I guess the one question I just want to ask is, what drew you to jazz at such a young age? Because I mean, I think that's quite young to get into jazz, at least from my perspective. Because I remember, like, my dad was a jazz drummer, and he was like super into jazz. He actually played one of his first bands were with my guitar tutor at uni.
Oh, brilliant.
When they were
Wow.
kids. So it was like kind of full circle thing. It's interesting, but yeah, I remember him being like, "Oh, listen to this," and it was like it could have been Joe Pass or something like that. I don't know, and I was like, with all due respect, Dad, like it sounds like crap to me. But that was when I was like, I don't know, I was into like Joe Satriani and just like shredding, kind of, well, trying to shred. And I just didn't understand that kind of music. It wasn't open to me yet, or my ears weren't open to it yet, should I say? But yeah, obviously it came around and kind of got into it eventually. But tell me, essentially, why jazz? What drew you in at like 13 or whatever age it was, 15?
I suppose, yeah, like that kind of age from about 14, 15, 16, I think is really important, not just for you as a musician, but I suppose you as a young adult as well, and how you're developing. You know, of course, that second decade of life, your brain is developing, and it's developing in amazing ways. But I think what was really interesting was seeing the evolution of how I wanted to understand something. So it's quite funny. I get picked on this quite a lot by friends and I suppose colleagues. Really, is I don't like to understand a piece of information or a subject in a in a superficial way. I really like digging deep into it and finding all the bits of or facets of information, trying to put them together, take it apart, and I suppose that's really a familial trait for me and my family. But
Have you ever been into like building things, like actually taking things apart?
Absolutely, yeah. That was. I suppose all that kind of starts with like like showing creativity at a really young age, either drawing or like building plans to things or that sort of thing. So construction and like I suppose engineering really has been I suppose a big part of my family and their lifestyle and their jobs as well. So perhaps it's the nature versus nurture argument. How much of that is just ingrained and instilled in me, and how much of it is kind of taught. But for me, getting into jazz, then why am I kind of mentioning that? Is I'm quite strange, I suppose, in the aspect of I don't like feeling comfortable anywhere. I don't like feeling comfortable in terms of my knowledge, because I'm kind of always of the belief that you need to strive to understand more or dig deeper or there's new ground to break. Once you're kind of able to understand the information that you have and you're able to develop it and build something else from it. So for me, I was quite satisfied, learning a lot of kind of blues stuff or I suppose like early gospel stuff as well, which I got a bit of experience in, and kind of thinking, yeah, this is great and it's really nice to hear all this stuff, but I want to take it further. So each time was, how do I take it further? And the interesting thing is, like, now at 23, I've still got that mindset that I had when I was 13, which was, okay, take it, play it, master it, then break it down, then understand it, and then how do I make it mine? Which, again, like I get picked on it because I'll stay on one subject and it'll be like, can we move on? Can we do something else in this session? Is there anything else we can do? And I'll be like, yeah, but let's take this apart. So hearing all that music coming through my house when I was younger was so, I suppose it was so fundamental at the time, but I didn't know that. I kind of had that rebellious streak of, like you were saying, I don't want to listen to this. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's all noise and it sounds like no one knows what they're doing. And the fact of the matter is I didn't know what I was kind of doing listening to her. I didn't understand what was going on. So when I got to a point that actually my musicianship and my interests had reached a peak of, okay, I need to move on to the next step. I need to move on to kind of playing, one scale to how is it these guys are playing, lots of different scales, and how does it sound so melodic? And then and then you start hearing melodies in tunes, and then it starts to intrigue you, and you go back into those worlds. And that's why I think as well it's really interesting to know the history of jazz as well. It's great to be a great player of it, but if you don't know the history of it, then how can you move on comfortably as a composer, as a player, by kind of disregarding all of what came before? Because what came before is essentially a big building block. Everyone kind of stands on the shoulders of giants, in the same way that to really, I suppose, in air quotes, you won't be able to see it if it's audio, but in air quotes is oh, that's completely slipped my mind. But essentially what I was going to say is, like, you have to have the fundamentals before you build on it. It's all progression in a way. So for me, it was all about progression, and it was about kind of learning things and hearing things and trying to understand them. So from a very academic sense.
Yep. I can see, like,
that's me being analytical about it, though. I suppose from another sense, though, is like, actually there is an emotional attachment to that music. There's an emotional attachment to hearing something that you don't understand.
Right.
Which I think is huge. Hearing something that you don't understand can be the difference between, I don't know, maybe you're in a pub or a restaurant or that sort of thing, or a cafe, and you hear something that's going on the speakers above, and you Shazam it. You decide to Shazam it, and you think that's amazing.
Shazam.
You know, I've been doing that recently, and it's been great for just hearing music on the go and discovering things. But
cool.
That whole process of, okay, I just heard something that I've never heard before. Or I do not understand that, and being able to capture that and take it apart, that I think is a really great skill to have. But it's a hard one, because as a teacher, it's difficult to teach it.
Yeah.
So
no, it's so interesting to hear, man. I think, like, a lot, we speak about this frequently. It's like, it's definitely very cerebral, and it's like you have a natural curiosity towards the, like, why is this the way it is? And like, it's really interesting. I think it shows in the other things that you're interested in life, or like philosophy, like economics, politics. Like you seem like you're quite into all that kind of stuff.
Oh, definitely.
And it's like, it's just interesting to hear, man, because I've come from a kind of completely opposite side, where it's I didn't know anything about music theory until, I say anything, again, air quotes, but I didn't know much about music theory until I actually went to uni and like had to learn it, and that's what unlocked it for me, and that's how I began to enjoy, for example, jazz. It's like I see it quite like kind of like Leibniz's idea on innate ideas. Basically, it's like it's a block of marble, and you chip away at it, and like I think, I can imagine it's like when we're born, or like the average like pop listener to the radio, it's just a block of marble with like a few dents in it maybe. And I think the more you start investigating music as a consumer or as a artist yourself, you're just chipping away at like different sides of the sculpture. There we go. And yeah, it's like you learn a little bit about, like, say, a certain sound, and it's like, cool, and then that unlocks something else and something else, and now I'm at the point where I'm listening to stuff that once I could not possibly make any sense of. I remember the first time I listened to Jonathan Kreisberg, I didn't even know when the melody started. I was like, what's happening? It sounds kind of cool, but I just don't get it. But now in a much different place. There was a couple of things I wanted to pick up on that, but so given that your approach is very, like, you said, academic, it's very, like, thorough, to say the least. How much of that do you find fits into or feeds into your approach to composition? Like, a lot of people talk about their approach to composition being like, it's just a vibe I'm trying to pick up on, or like maybe they see colors, shapes, whatever it is. And I know you've written some pieces inspired by many different things, whether that be like Picasso or other bits and bobs. So yeah, like how much of that approach feeds into your composition and or improvisation?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, and like I think a lot of what you said is relevant as well to the answer that I'm going to give you. And I suppose, like, for me, looking at it, my nature is it's very analytical. It's very cerebral, I suppose, to some degree, and it's all about kind of interpreting music and I suppose it's at the end of the day, it's academic. It's like we're talking about. The thing with composition, though, and the thing with improvisation is, and I'm going to use a lot of flurry language that maybe some people, perhaps yourself as well, either disagree with or they may see a different way. Is actually that, like, when you're going down that route of discovering composition, you're discovering a part of yourself and what you really want to put onto a piece of paper, or what you want to kind of put into the world or on the bandstand. And those things are very personal. They're very personal representations of what you think of the world, what you think of music, what it means to you, what you're drawing upon, and what you're trying to, I suppose, exhibit. So I have a massively tough time trying to compose music, although it seems like it's quite easy or natural, because I suppose that's the detriment, or to the detriment of social media, is like it makes everyone look like everything is easy and it's just second nature to them. But I think the fact of the matter is like, it's like you say, it's like sculpting Michelangelo's David or something. It's taking a big block of marble or whatever that material was, and just trying to chip it away and trying to create something.
Cardboard.
Well, at least it wasn't Lego. So, yeah, but it's a very personal experience. It's like, how do you come up with a composition that is representative of your time on the earth, or your time at the moment, or your time in your life, I suppose, as well, or things that are kind of influencing you. What can you create or compose that is going to stand the test of time for you, or is going to be I kind of think of it as like an emotional marker in a way, or like a milestone in your life. So for me, being quite academically inclined is difficult, because composition doesn't, for me at least, it doesn't really roll off, what's the word? It doesn't kind of roll off my creative juices, or it doesn't kind of like kickstart them or invigorate any ideas by thinking about things academically. So I know there's, these great kind of compositions as well from Coltrane that are very much mathematical in nature, I suppose, and there's a lot of theory out there to create them, and a lot of people listen to them and have a real emotional connection to them, and that's brilliant. And Coltrane is obviously the king of that kind of world as well. Same with guys like Messiaen as well. But to really connect with a piece of music, I have to kind of take all that information and put it in a box and just kind of forget about it. So I have to be able to connect with a simple melody or a chord structure, or trying to envision what it is I'm trying to bring out with imagery in my music. So composing is a hard one for me, because I have to go into realms of looking at myself and my own skill set and saying, okay, if I'm going to compose something, is it for one of two things? Is it here to challenge me, or is it here to exhibit me? Those are the ways that I kind of think about it. And unfortunately, like, it's an ever ongoing battle between what is the point of the music that you're making. Yeah. So I suppose it can be the same for anyone. It could be the same for writers creating a book or a story, or it can be the same as artists trying to create something. It's like, am I creating something for everyone else, which is fine as well if that's the way you want to go? Am I creating something for myself, or am I creating something that I suppose is neither of those things? So it's a tough point. It's a tough thing to say, here's my process of composing, here's my process of coming to an idea.
Yep. That's all incredibly fascinating. And I think the part you said at the end there, like, kind of just asking yourself, why am I composing, or why am I doing this dance routine? You know, like, what is the point, I guess, is the question. And I think, like, I've come around to that a few times and formed it in different ways. But it's just an interesting thing to think about, because I'm in that position right now, as hopefully people know, like, getting this album together. Yeah. And it's like, I see this purely as a snapshot of what I sound like at 23 in 2019, right? And it's supposed to be very honest, right? But what you said is, like, you either want to write a piece of music that exhibits you or challenges you. Is that what you said?
Yep.
And it's like, I have never approached a composition in the way of, like, thinking I want to challenge myself. But that's such a... It's so telling of your personality and the way you approach stuff. It's like, you want to get better. You're like, no, it's cool, man. Like, I read a book It's called Coltrane, and obviously it's about John Coltrane's life, and it just speaks about him and is like, as most like jazz musicians, and I think like musicians who are like, yeah, let's just say jazz musicians. We have this curiosity to like stretch further and further and try and reach for like the next thing, whether that's like kind of personally or something that's already happened that you don't understand yet. And I've never used that approach in my composition. Maybe that's because I feel like I'm a very my compositional kind of age is very young right now, and I mean that because it's like this is the first thing I've like tried to do with this album, and that's what I actually like about it. That it's very honest. I mean, hopefully it comes across that way when people get to hear it, but I think that's maybe something just to take away is like maybe I should try composing music that challenges me, you know? Like obviously I've done a bit of study in things like giant steps and that shit challenges me.
Of course.
But it's like just seeing how that's put together and then getting inspired by how far that can go and thinking, all right, let's compose something that's like gonna really challenge me. Hopefully the people listening can take something away from that as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, do you have anything to add to that?
I think I do in terms of like, this is the bit that usually either kills my process or invigorates it. And it's the question that we've kind of been going over here is like, what is the point to what you're going to create here? What is the point? And like the point can be anything you like. It can be anything you like. It can be anything that you're experiencing, or it can be I don't know, maybe there doesn't need to be a point to it, but
maybe that's the point.
Yeah, it is. But I do also think it's interesting trying to study other people's modus operandi, if you like. So I constantly ask composers of all kinds of stuff. I've recently been asking people who compose kind of a lot of modern classical music, a couple guys who compose jazz as well. There's some great stuff going on right now, in kind of like the UK jazz scene as well, which is really interesting. That's kind of taking the music in a different way. And the thing that I like to ask them is not necessarily coming from that kind of fanboy, oh, how did you do that? How did you play that lick? What
strings do you use?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what picks do you use, man? You sound so good. It's the question of like, what is your process? What was the point to the work? What was the point to the album? What was the point to the song? Because I feel I got it, and that's cool. I got it in a way that it fulfilled me emotionally. It challenged my ears. It caught me off guard. It did all the kind of checklist things. I think, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that more than I really, I suppose, even for the time being. I enjoyed it more than I realized. But what was it that made you compose that piece of music? So for me, when I kind of come to sitting down on a Friday night or whenever I have any free time or whether I'm traveling, and I think, do you know what? I've just heard a melody in my head. I've just heard an idea, or I've just seen. Here's a big one for me at the moment: is seeing pictures and trying to relay an idea through music of a visual image or of a place or that sort of thing. Is trying to say like, what is the point to what I'm doing? Why am I trying to kind of build this complex structure that's going to make up, hopefully in other people's ears, as it is in mine, a visual image of, I don't know, maybe it's fields, maybe it's Sweden, who knows what it is. But that's a kind of very, I suppose, impressionist kind of way of seeing things. Impressionist and post-impressionist way of how do you kind of come to a point in which maybe you create something visually, you create something that's supposed to create a sound or colors or that sort of thing. So I think it comes down to the fact that we can ask all these questions and think about it very academically and say, there's a million different points. I want to solve climate change with this piece of music. These bar chords and power chords are going to save the polar bears. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The problem is, or here's the solution at least. The problem is you can have too many things that you want to achieve through your music, to the point that you feel like, okay, well, I'm just building up a big sense of objectives that I have to hit. In actual fact, what you should really do, just compose and see where it goes. Don't think about the theory. Don't think about, if other people take this, how will they play it? is the theory right? Blah blah blah. Just play something, and if you want to, analyze it later, or don't analyze it at all. But don't go in there being completely overridden by an objective that you've set that's unrealistic or that's unattainable, or perhaps you feel doesn't serve other people's ears, because that is ultimately the thing that will stop you in your tracks. It's like, actually just do.
Yep.
So for me, and it sounds like I'm kind of reeling this off like I've been teaching this, or that I've mastered this. In actual fact, I'm telling myself this is do. Stop thinking about things academically. Just
totally,
do.
man.
Because you don't think about how you react to something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, you're probably gonna nullify the emotion or the reaction that you have. But do and feel.
Yep.
Just do and feel, and
That's great.
become something.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I think I'm gonna get that put here, like tattooed. Do and feel, but not for real, man. Like I think
I'm getting just though.
Sorry, in comics, yeah. New Times Robin, man, of course. No, but I frequently, like, I don't know, just going on that little thing about like just do, and this sounds so like sort of maybe cliche, but like I think Nike's slogan is the best slogan ever. Just do it.
It's like completely ripped it off.
No, but for real, it's like it's just like, I don't know, it inspires me. Like hearing you say that, it's like, it's good to hear you say that. I want you to go and do it. Like I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, here's another thing as well. Like, sorry to jump in, but here's another thing. Is like, think about it from a philosophical way of just doing. There's a great phrase that I've been hearing and seeing posted around a lot, which I think is good, and that's being posted around a lot, is simply action what is it? Thought is the enemy of action. So thought is the enemy of action, or the action is the enemy of thought, I suppose, or whatever way you want to kind of interpret it. Is that once you start doing something, it's quite hard for you to override in your brain overthinking about things, or trying to like build superstructures in your mind about how things are supposed to operate, and that eventually will either sink your idea completely, or you'll talk yourself out of doing it. And the actual fact, like, your action is the only thing that really speaks for itself, because I can be thinking up a lot of great music, I can be thinking about playing all the time,
Totally, man.
if I don't do it, nobody else sees it. So it is those that ridiculous cliche of actions speak louder than words is also true for how you should really envisage I suppose art as well. It's like, just put it out there, just do it, just put the shoes on, go out and do it, or pick up the pencil and just do it, or just try something that you're completely inexperienced in. Just do it.
I think it's absolutely the best way to learn as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just do it. It doesn't matter if you're not quite sure how to compose a song. Like, find something that you like and just like try and follow that like curiously. And again, like the analytical side can come later. Maybe it's like you're stuck and you need to work out how to get somewhere else, or maybe it's like the song's finished and you need to try and let the band know how to play it.
Sure.
Like, well, this chord is this, like, why is it that? And that's something that I think that part of the reason why I started writing tunes was because of that. It was like, I got to a point when, you'd done so many tunes, like learning other people's stuff, and I was like, why don't I just try and write something myself? And it was just like, just do it. Just follow your ears, follow your heart. No, but really, it's like, just be curious. And that's what I tell all my students. It's like, be curious. It's the best thing for you as a creative.
Yep.
And yeah, like curiosity as well as the approach of like, just do it. You can get so much achieved. And I think a lot of people get caught up on the theoretical side of it and not like thinking they can't do stuff because they don't know how to justify it, when really it's like, there's stuff I'm sure well, maybe not you because you're like Mr. Analytical, but like certainly other musicians have done that. Really, they were just like, I done it because it sounds good. And it's like, why does it sound good? It's like, I don't have to justify that because it's like this chord of this key or whatever. And yeah, I think like, just do it, just start. And it's
I think
funny
it's looking at the equilibrium.
Yeah.
You're looking at the equilibrium of like, what thought pattern, or what, like, how should I start something? And the equilibrium is either think about it too much or do so much that you're not even thinking about it. And actually the equilibrium is, okay, if you just do it, maybe later you can transcribe what you did, or you can think about it in a, an analytical way. But it's like, find the equilibrium between, like making something that's kind of meaningful to you, but you're not kind of destroyed by trying to create something that's, must have a meaning. Yep. So it's quite weird. It's like, have a meaning, but also don't have a meaning. So it sounds like counterintuitive there, but all of that can be solved by just do it and just see if there's a purpose in it at the end of the day, if there is.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about like following ideas to an end, right? And I think, I don't know how you feel about this, but I certainly need to practice that more. It's like, even if it's just like a really short 4-bar progression or melody, or even a 1-bar thing or a chord voicing, whatever it is, but like follow it to its end and see where it goes, because it's the process of like creating something, and that needs practiced as much as playing a solo does, or like playing a standard, or even learning to play your first song. It's a process. Yep. And the more times you repeat that process, the easier it gets. So I guess a question I have for you as a teacher,
sure.
and I'd like to maybe shine some light on it as well, as you have a student, let's say, right, and he's maybe talking about the things we're chatting about, and he's asking for advice like, how can I get into composition? From maybe the perspective of like, maybe not knowing a ton of music theory, or maybe they do, but like, what advice generally would you give to someone who wants to create but is unsure how to start? Because like we can say, just start, man, just do it, but it's like sometimes you need to give people direction,
Well, yeah, because we're saying, just start, because we come with that fundamental or like building blocks knowledge of where to go. And, if you or I said, well, if I said to you, say I took a lesson with you and said, look, man, I've got all this theory under my belt and I want to compose tunes, but I don't know where to start. And you say, just start with a melody. That's fine, because all that building block stuff is there. I know how to play a melody or sing a melody or transcribe a melody for myself. But let's take your analogy then. The hypothetical situation is a student comes and says, like, I want to get into composition. For me personally, I want to understand what they think composition is.
Oh.
So, and it might be a simple answer as, I want to write my own songs. Great. Okay. That's enough of a definition for me to start some kind of pedagogy of, how do we start this? Yeah. Or maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's, I want to create something that other people can kind of play on, and there's freedom. So basically what I want to do is create a musical environment or playground in which I suppose, like much like John Zorn's music, if you're familiar with him, his music is all about kind of like it's game based. So it's very strange. Or like a Kneebody.
What's that name again? John
Zorn.
Zorn.
John Zorn is a very interesting composer, because he cool. I'm fairly certain that's right. You might need to fact check me on that. But
I'll take a note. John Zorn.
Yeah, so he does a lot of composing in kind of like game based music. So big style, I suppose, big style bands. That's not the proper term.
That's fine.
But you know what I mean? Like, I suppose a group with many personnel. It's not necessarily an orchestra, but it's also not really a big band.
Yeah.
But maybe it's someone like that, or it's I can't remember the other person I just mentioned there. I suppose Kneebody is another one. Ben Wendell's group have a super interesting basis for communicating, and so their idea of composition is about communication. So it's not a game necessarily, but they're playing to the common, I suppose, constraints of what's considered composition. So they're playing to the fact that the entire thing is, we're producing a song, but when we play in the song, we're so focused on what's happening with the bass player or the drummer or that sort of person, that sort of player in the group, that they have their own vocabulary that starts to take the piece in a different way. That's saying, look, repeat this. Let's play this motif again.
There are many different ways of approaching
it. Exactly. So going back to what you're saying is, like, if someone said to me, I want to get into composing, I want to start composition, I'd say, okay, what do we know about composition so far? What's your purpose for composition? What have you been listening to that makes you want to get into it? So when a student answers those kind of questions, I can start to go, okay, so you want to create a piece of music that's for an expansive orchestra. Maybe it's a soundtrack. Maybe it's film music or that sort of thing. Or maybe you want to create
Jason Mraz.
Jason Mraz, yep. If you want to
Simple.
use that, exactly. Yep. You want to have other people sing to it, or you want use the same kind of form and structure as a lot of the jazz standards, and allow people to kind of solo and have the interpretation of what you want to do with it. So that would be me. What would you say for that? Because I'm sure you've had a student that's come and asked you that.
Yeah, I mean, my general approach to teaching music is, I mean, whatever the person wants to learn, I try and facilitate that. Of course, that's the job of a teacher. And it'd be great to talk about kind of teaching generally after this, because we've got some interesting things to talk about. But yeah, like it depends on the age of the person and their experience, of course. Because if it's like a 23-year-old person who like has a bunch of theory under the belt compared to a kid who's like playing, like they're just beginning but they like making music, so it's like it's going to be a different approach. But I think the most important thing, kind of agreeing with what you said, is like understanding what they like the sound of, and like what is it you'd like to compose that sounds like, right? Kind of like that. So for example, if a student is very interested in Guns N' Roses, right, which none of my students are, That's think.
Sad.
At least they don't tell me. But yeah, say they're interested in Guns N' Roses and they know a little bit of music theory. So for me, and this is just my approach, it's combining music theory with something that they like, making them understand what it is they like in theoretical terms, so they can transfer that knowledge into their own art, right? So understanding maybe their favorite song and just maybe the functions of the chords, or if there's a specific voicing, like if they like that oh god, what's it called? I forgot the song. That's so bad. It's the one that goes 159, like C minor, G sharp. Oh, the Police song, Message in a Bottle.
Message in a Bottle, yeah.
Right, so say it's like they really like that. It's like looking at what an add 9 chord is, and like just simply, again, going back to what I said, trying to get them to be curious. And it's like, all right, here's the voicing. Maybe that's what like pulled on your heartstrings, right? Or made you feel like, yeah, I want to write something that like has that vibe. So I would take that idea and try and show them it in as many different contexts as possible. And I would literally just set them an assignment and be like, all right, so for the next lesson, I'd like you to take this information and just try and create something with it, right? Don't overthink it. Just like see where it goes. Be curious, all right? And that'll either fail or it'll pass. I mean, I guess if they... Not that I assign my students like that, but what I mean is like they'll either not do the homework or they will, right?
Yeah.
And if they do it, then that's great. They created something. And I think what sometimes students need is just, I done that. That was me. I made that thing happen. And fair enough, it was inspired by Message in a Bottle, but it's undeniable that everything's inspired by something, you know, even if it was like a piece of your music that's inspired by Picasso, it's like there's still lines to draw, you know, nothing comes from... Something doesn't just come from nothing. So that's kind of the process I would go for. But I do songwriting workshops actually with like young kids. And that process is way different because that one's more like lyric based, and it'll be like thinking about like, all right, what could the song be about? And a funny example is like, all right, really disruptive kid, super loud, says he wants to write a song about Toys R Us. And I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it. So we just talk about something like, all right, what makes a song, right? And for me, I'm always saying to them, because I'm talking about like young kids who like pop music. All right, it needs a good story, all right? What does a story have? And they've all written stories before. It's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So we look at structure and we think about like, how we could tell a story, essentially. So it's like two completely different sides of it. But yeah, I guess to sum up, it's taking their kind of natural, something that draws them naturally to music. Like, so whether it's like being funny and writing a song about Toys R Us, or like trying to convert that into music, or if it's the kid who's like super into Guns N' Roses or the Police, and it's like trying to take their energy and like give them as much as they can with that. Yeah. But then some people just, I don't know, maybe they're a bit older and they really know their way around the instrument, but it's just confidence.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like it's approach is different for everybody. But I think very generally that's my answer.
I like that answer a lot. I think what you said resonates with me in terms of like, you know, if you take a student from kind of A to B, you want to obviously talk about where A is and where B is and where you kind of want to move from there. And there's a lot of things that that are going to be useful in determining what their journey is going to be. So their age, their experience, their knowledge, the prerequisite knowledge is a big thing as well. I do think that there is a common line that both you and I will know, and I suppose it's strange because sometimes you'll meet a teacher that just doesn't kind of do it, or that you have a great lesson with, but you leave the lesson with a bit of a sour taste. And it's like, if we were both teaching students composition, and that's what we did, the thing that you want to instill is that there aren't any wrong answers. Absolutely. In the lesson. In that hour, there are no wrong answers. And the nice thing is, when you leave that that teaching environment and you go out to do it for yourself, is knowing that actually there are still no wrong answers. There are no wrong, like that's hugely important for trying to instill curiosity in students, is telling them, okay, you're starting your journey. That doesn't mean that everything you do will be wrong. But it's the same as saying, someone who's super advanced on the journey, who's working with, full-scale orchestras or symphonies, and who's obviously very experienced in it or does it for work, is also saying, look, I know you've got a hefty pool of experience here, but still, nothing that you're doing is wrong. Yeah. It's all an experiment to find out where you want to go with it. And I think if you start that off early, it encourages curiosity. It is a recipe for encouraging curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. No, it's all kind of hitting the nail on the head. One thing we're obviously we keep pointing at is teaching, right? Mm-hmm. And this is my digression, or I guess my link into the next topic.
Hey, sorry for interrupting the podcast. I'll just be 1 minute. If you're receiving value from this podcast, consider supporting me by getting some of the Sitting In merch. From teespring.com/stores/sitting-in-podcast. That's teespring.com/stores/sitting-in-podcast.
And so one thing that we've spoken about a little bit, especially because we were hanging out 2 weeks ago, was it?
Yeah, it was about that time.
Yeah, so we got chatting about something that I'd been thinking about. And I don't want to go into social media too much unless it becomes apparent. But one thing that I do see on social media a lot, and I guess maybe just generally in the scene, is that there's, here comes the air quotes, teachers, right? Mm-hmm. And let's face it, the reality of teaching is that if you know something, yes, you can pass it on. Mm-hmm. All right? That's, I could teach a kid how to eat with a knife and fork. I taught them, right? Sure. But does that qualify me to be a teacher? Not really. I wouldn't get a job in a nursery because of that, right? And what I see a lot generally is people who can play guitar, right? And so they become a teacher because it's some people think it's easy money, right? Mm-hmm. And as you and I, both teachers, I guess for probably the majority of our work, right?
Yep.
I find that that's quite, in a way, it's quite offensive, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be too precious of what it means to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm just wondering if, let's get a discussion going, because let's face it, we see people on Instagram who have a lot of followers and they start advertising that they're doing lessons, and you listen to them play and you're like, all right, cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What am I going to pay for to learn from you? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But just get talking.
I like that. Yeah. So what you're really talking about is okay, so if you're someone who wants to go into the teaching kind of basis and you've got a hefty following, maybe that's, obviously that's how you'd set it up. What you're kind of looking for is competence. You're looking for, how much competence does the player have? And you're only going to see what they post. And I suppose that's, that's your advertisement.
Yep.
You're only going to see what they post. So for someone who's starting out, they might hear someone who, is, I suppose, is a beginner of their own and think, well, they're a bit further ahead than me. They've got a good following. They must have a following for a reason. That ABC logic of all these things line up. They've got good quality, they're getting shared, blah, blah, blah. I should take them on. But there has to come a point that, okay, so I'm thinking about myself personally, is I believe that you have to be, as a teacher, you have to be humble about knowledge that you do know and knowledge that, let's be honest, you just Googled it as they asked it.
Absolutely.
And there comes a point that I think, and I've had this as well, is students that come to you and they sound brilliant. They sound brilliant. And I say, look, we've had a good session today, we've done all these things, but being honest, you're of a skill level that you probably want to study with someone who can take you in that direction a bit further. And it's knowing where that line is. And that is not a money grabbing scheme. That is just being humble or showing humility and saying, look, for you to really progress as a musician, move on. Get someone who's on the scene, who's experienced. I mean, I've experienced it myself. I took a lesson with a guy, I won't mention his name, but about a month ago, who was a fantastic player. I'd heard him down a jam somewhere. Amazing player, amazing. And I sat and we played together, and it was funny the entire time. He was almost a bit too humble. He was saying, look, man, I don't know if there's much I can teach you here. And I said, look, I don't need to have a PDF. I don't need I don't need a big rundown of what you're doing. It's the interaction that we have, the playing together, that sort of thing. And he said, look, if you're looking to do this stuff further and really get into the stuff that even I'm practicing, I'll link you up with this teacher or push you onto this person. I thought, do you know what, that's a huge point in terms of, like, if you take that attitude into teaching other people, I'm sure you'll succeed, because you have a humility about you, which is, okay, players come to me because they've heard me on the scene, or they've heard me on a record or that sort of thing, and they're really curious. But what they're maybe not understanding is that the stuff that I'm playing is stuff that I'm still practicing. So maybe I'm kind of like one page ahead of them. And knowing that, being able to see the overview and saying, actually, I'm only one page ahead of you. You should take a lesson with the guy who's an entire book ahead of you, or an entire library ahead of us. And that for me is big. So when it comes to me teaching other students, I like to know exactly where I lie and where they lie, because I need to be able to help them with all that I can, with all the materials and with all the skill that I can. Because, if a guy comes to me and he's blown over changes better than I can, and he wants to say, I want to develop ideas and blah, 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 I say, okay, look, your playing is amazing, but you need to go to someone who's not just going to be a bit better than you, who is going to roast you, because those are the guys you get real development from. So you're talking about people who, have big followings and just, I suppose, are offering lessons here and there, and that's cool. I suppose social media is part of that global market, and teaching is your commodity or your service. And I suppose some people will take up a lesson with someone who does sound that page ahead better. But it's a funny question. Like, it's like, is that down to the teacher saying, okay, I'll be honest, look, you're actually not that much air quotes worse is not really the word I'm kind of going for. It's the only one that springs to mind, but you could actually benefit somewhere else? Or is it a money grabbing scheme? And that seemed to be a really, really big thing in the, I suppose, the turn of the century, really, with the internet kind of going on, was all these money grabbing schemes about, you can double your money doing this, or you can blah, 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 blah. And it was all people that were touting their expertise in certain fields. In actual fact, they were not really what they advertised. So it's knowing that what you're kind of buying into is doing what it says on the tin. And that kind of takes a bit of, I suppose, observation and deduction by the student as well, which is also an interesting point. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think that there is a pernicious element to musicians offering lessons that when you're being completely brutal and honest, that actually they don't have much to offer people yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely I see it a lot online, right? Obviously can't name names, but straight up, I see people who aren't, I hate saying like good and bad because it doesn't really exist in music, but there are people who are competent, and there are people who can like sort of half do it sort of thing. Yeah. And I see a lot of people who are maybe like half okay players advertising lessons. And I just think it's like, it's a shame, right? Because two things. They're not, I guess in a way, they're not being honest with themselves. But at the same time, one could argue they can pass something on, so therefore they can be a teacher, right? But I guess the reason I got to this, like initially, was me advertising myself as a teacher, like not even online, just like generally on the internet. And sorry, I mean not on social media, but generally on the internet. And seeing that my competition is like people who have full-time jobs teaching for £15 an hour, right? And well, someone who has a kid who wants to get into playing guitar, right? They're going to choose the £15 an hour one if they don't have a musical background or value or any experience in like having someone teach their kid. And I think it's quite damaging to the industry for two reasons. First of all, that kid's probably not gonna, let's be honest, like get a great teacher, right?
Mhm.
Maybe there are people who are like, they take up a few students and they
Yeah.
work as a lawyer and they are actually decent teachers, and that's fine. But I'm talking about the other side of it. And so I think it's a shame for maybe people like you and I or other people who have like maybe just finished a degree and like they're getting into teaching, but they
Mhm.
can't even get students because there's so many like people just teaching because it's easy money, and it's
Mhm.
like it's not if you do it seriously. It's
Yeah.
like it's a job, and I guess I just got a bit kind of disappointed and angry with
Mhm.
that at a point.
Yeah.
And then I saw it on the online world as well. Like people with like 100,000 followers. Whoa, that means they're good, doesn't it? Obviously not.
Mhm.
But younger people see that and they think that's like, oh, I'm taking lessons with someone who's famous.
Mhm.
And maybe just a word of warning to anybody who's listening and like might want to take lessons or give their kid lessons or recommend a teacher to their friend. It's like do a bit of background research and like just sometimes it's hard to judge if someone's even a good musician if you don't know, but don't just choose the cheapest option
Yeah.
because you want your kid to get a good experience teaching. You wouldn't like, let me give a really bad analogy. All right, what if you moved to England from France and you couldn't speak English? You wouldn't just like pay the guy at the local pub a fiver to teach your kid English. Like you'd want to like really get them taught and like you want to invest in their
Yeah.
education. And this is
Absolutely.
by no means an advert for me to get more students because of this podcast or you as well. I mean, of course, if you want, you can hit us up. But I don't know. I just wish people would be a bit more honest. And I see a lot of people talking about honesty nowadays within playing real stuff as well. You know,
Mhm.
there's a big, massive debate. It's not even a debate. It's basically people ranting about people doing fake guitar videos now.
Yeah.
And
Oh, this whole speed up thing.
yeah, I saw you made a post about it
Yeah.
as well, and
I've
it's
read
a
that.
bit weird. But I think generally maybe we're coming around to people who will start being more honest, like generally. But I think we're kind of going on a tangent here, but I'm kind of liking where it's going.
Mm.
One thing that's coming out of that is people trying to be honest, but now they're being like, oh, by the way, everybody, just to let you know, this is improvisation
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
there are mistakes. And I think that's fine, but I don't know. It just seems a bit. We're in a funny
Mhm.
place. It's like in between a movement happening, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're kind of touching on it without even saying is like something that I've known from the get-go about online teaching, because online teaching obviously is not it's not my entire teaching income, I suppose. Like I do a lot
Yeah,
of teaching in person as well, which I think is really important to do, is getting out to the community of your local community even. But
absolutely.
for online teaching, one thing that I've known from the get-go is that it needs an element of trust on both sides, because there is always that element of like you could be sitting there with a guy who's like, yeah, I'm going to teach you, and he looks all official and everything's cool, but there's always the reality that that person could say, okay, just pay me 50 quid or 60 quid or whatever, and we'll start the lesson. There's always that thing in the back of your mind that says, what if this person isn't real and I just pay into their account and then it's gone, and or maybe I don't know, maybe you finally get your lesson, you've waited a long time, you're on a waiting list, and you get a lesson with a guy who's brilliant, and you spend a mountain of money, and then you get there and maybe you realize that there's not much he can teach you.
Hmm.
So what's happened is like, to some degree, your trust as a consumer is going to diminish or it's going to decay if the product is not exactly what you want. So there's a fine line now between, there has to be a level of trust between like B2C, so business to customer, obviously. Like if it doesn't do what it says on the tin, which I've obviously mentioned before, then nobody is going to want to buy it, meaning that nobody is going to want to refer to it or share it or tell other people about it. So your word of mouth advertising. But
Yeah.
there's another thing as well, is like how true to yourself as the business, if you like, air quotes again, as the musician offering lessons, how true to yourself actually are you in terms of, do you actually want to take people on something, or do you just want to take a snake oil, be the snake oil salesman and just take money from them? So
Yeah.
on both sides there has to be an element of like of trust and humility, because
Hmm.
those are, I suppose, very human things, and you got to hope that both sides aren't suppose, manipulated, or that both sides aren't like what's what I suppose tricked out of what they really think is going on.
Yeah.
So when I say like from the get-go, I've known about that. I've always known that you're essentially teaching someone that you may never meet in person. You may never see them face to face. And I know that there's a bit of a fear about that. There's a bit of fear about catfishing, obviously, with all the online date stuff, and that's well documented. But people don't realize that this is a transactional service. It's a service that's based on the goodwill of the fact that you are actually a teacher, for one, and you're not just some AI who's stealing everyone's money or whatever, or hacking into people's PayPal accounts or whatever, or any kind of nonsense like that. It's like there is certain on between B to C. So if that gets decayed or eroded, I suppose is a better word, over time, with people who are advertising things that are not what they advertise, there'll come a point that people have a distrust in from what they see on social media, which is a shame for guys like you and I who are actually, and I know you well enough and you know me well enough, that we are actually supplying, hopefully, worth and value to people who want to be involved in it. So that's eventually, if it became a big kind of epidemic thing, or that people are getting ripped off by online guitar tutors who said they were going to teach jazz and they didn't. They didn't teach jazz at all. They taught something else. But it would eventually hurt the entire community, the entire teaching of community. If you're like, okay, if I can't trust you, then I won't trust anyone. Yeah. And that's the point in which you have to say, okay, are you just kind of getting involved in the teaching for the money, or are you actually wanting to do it to be a proper teacher?
Yep. No, that's a great point, man. I think it comes back to you turning that sensitivity down because of the banging.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
I've got some builders in my house at the moment. It's
all right.
Yeah. Damn. I don't think it will last forever, but
it's fine, man. So one thing I was going to say, it comes back to, again, is honesty. And we spoke about that in composition as well. And just generally portraying yourself online, it's like, just be honest with where you're at. It's going to be so much more helpful for maybe people giving you advice who are friends, or like just being humble. And it's like, I think honesty is a big part of my approach to this album that I'm working on. And I remember speaking to my friend Vincent about this, and we had this massive chat, and ended up just coming back to like, man, just be honest. Like, don't shoot for anything. Just be yourself, be honest. And that's the best you can do. And that requires a little bit of humility sometimes. But if you can get through that, I think you'll just generally be happier, I would say.
Yeah.
But there's one other thing I want to ask you before we kind of round this up, and go with it as much as you want, or keep it short and sweet. It's up to you. But since we've spoken about teaching quite a lot here, it's been a great chat. I kind of want to give two questions, but it's the same question, just phrased in two different sides.
Sure. Okay.
All right. So the first one is, what advice? And this is super general, I know, but just go with it. What advice would you give to anybody wanting to learn music? And second, what advice, this is a much kind of bigger question, what advice would you give to anybody wanting to get into jazz? Because you have come totally from that background in a much different way from I. So maybe if you want to go for like the generalist first.
Sure. Oh, okay, so sorry, I have the brain of a squirrel. So the first question is obviously...
First question is, what advice would you give to just anybody wanting to get into learning music? Okay, doesn't matter what instrument it is, just like generally.
Well, in a way, like, both have the same answers, because music is essentially, I'm going to use it and everyone uses it, but it is a language, and it has to be taught like a language, and it has to be understood and felt and attached to as a language. So listen to things, find out what you like by listening to things, and eventually what will happen is those things will become, I suppose, ingrained in your subconscious, and you'll seek those things out. You'll sit and want to learn a piece of music that you never thought was I suppose achievable to some degree. It's all about listening and just finding out where your influences are, and I think as quick as possible getting on track with someone that can point you in a direction. So I've got a guy who he's just picked up guitar after he's picked up guitar after something like 10 years not playing. He's kind of been on and off with guitar, and it's been interesting to like really bring him back into the music world and really stick with it. And what I've seen is like he's made he's made huge leaps and bounds in his ability, and it's really nice to see, because it tells me that, you know, if you're a guy who's I don't know, what's the word? Middle age is not right, but it's not young, but he's not old.
It's fine. It's fine.
But you know what I mean? It's like people who immediately come with the concern that, am I too old to do this? Am I, you know, I want to start again and I don't know, blah blah blah. And in actual fact, like, you can learn anytime you like. You can learn anytime, but you just have to be curious and you have to listen. So the thing that I've seen that's been really encouraging is, like, his development has come from the fact that he wants to be listening all the time. He's always picking things out, and he'll suggest, you know, why don't you try, why should we listen to this? Like, how does this happen? What goes on here? What's this guy's technique doing? Most recently, it's been a lot of kind of flamenco music, that sort of thing.
Cool.
And he was saying, you know, like, how do I? And I said, well, it's great that you're even listening to it in the first place and you're discovering it. So learning music, I'd say get a teacher that can put you on track, because you can learn a lot by yourself, sure, but you will eventually hit a point that you will feel advanced, but there will be key areas of your knowledge that you will have holes in. And I'm saying this from experience, not just as a student, but as a teacher. It's like guys who sound amazing over tunes, that sound brilliant, that can play, you know, cello suites and all sorts of things, Scarlatti, all kinds of stuff. But when it comes to, like, knowing the theory or being able to kind of read it from the notation, understand what's going on with it, they're amiss, or that kind of knowledge goes amiss for them. And it's a shame, because it's like, if someone pointed you in that direction, you would probably be even further ahead. So for anyone that kind of really wants to get into music, or that, you know, next year their New Year's resolution is to really take it seriously, is seek out a tutor that inspires you, that is positive as well, and that can kind of push you in that direction. So the second part of your question was, you know, how do you get into jazz? I think there's a lot of different ways into it, and I think as well a teacher is a good thing to get into, because a teacher will obviously guide you between all the things that you need to know, the fundamentals, the building blocks, and the things that you have to discover for yourself. But ultimately, getting into jazz is about listening. And it's funny, I think there's a lot of guys who say, you know, I want to sound jazzy, or I want to sound like, do you know what I mean? Like, who have like a quite a varied notion of what it is they want, or an objective that's like, I heard this thing on an album recently and I don't understand it because they sound like the wrong notes, but I feel like it's the right notes. I was like, okay, if that's what you're talking about, we can analyze that, or we can properly take you down the route of, like, doing it for yourself and being able to understand it and go down that route, which is great. But I'd say the biggest thing is listening. The biggest thing for learning jazz, though, and it is fundamental, and people miss it out of two things. They miss it out of laziness, and I'm saying that as bluntly as possible. They miss it out of laziness, and they miss it out of, I suppose, not being knowledgeable about the history of the music. Is learn the songs, learn the standards. Yeah. Because it's all, you know, it's great if you can play a 2-5-1, or you can play 3 different melodic minors over the dominant, or whatever it is, or inversions of chords, crazy chords. But if you don't know the standards, then you're not truly learning what the jazz tradition is. So, yeah, for if you're really serious about learning jazz, and you're being true to yourself in where you want to take it, and you want to take it seriously, don't just kind of say, you know, I want to sound jazzy, I want to just kind of play the altered scale over things, or I'm going to use things. It's like, okay, maybe contemporary standard jazz, or traditional kind of jazz knowledge is like, I don't know, something that you're not interested in. Okay, fine. It doesn't hurt you to kind of learn 1 or 2 things there. It doesn't hurt you to learn a couple tunes. It doesn't hurt you to read about the history, because all of it is linked in a way that it didn't just appear. Hip hop didn't just appear. Funk didn't just appear. Blues didn't just appear. And jazz certainly did not just appear. And so all the music that's coming out now that we think, you know, listening to is a good one, is Mike Marino stuff as well. Mike Marino is coming out with some brilliant pieces of music. Or even take Alan Holdsworth stuff, which is so out there, so crazy, and so, like, I suppose not conventional, I suppose, is the way that some people would kind of describe it. But it's saying, okay, well, if that's where I want to get to, it can't hurt me to kind of go down the traditional route a bit, learn a couple tunes, learn how the melody works over those chords, learn the rhythm or comping patterns, that sort of thing, and then take it where you want to go. So for jazz, it's 2 things. It's listen and learn standards. And Great. I think for me personally, it's like it's down to Peter Bernstein really giving that information out. but it seems so obvious. But don't be lazy. Learn those tunes.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, man. And I would give similar advice, although not in the same sort of position as you with the jazz thing. It's like, if I do have a student who wants to get into jazz, which I feel like I'm qualified to teach a bit of, it's like, it's the same thing. It's like, all right, well, you need to listen and you need to learn tunes, because that's kind of where it comes from. The only reason you can play rock is because you learned your favorite rock songs. So it's like, let's do the same thing with jazz.
Of course.
Sweet. All right, so gonna round it up here, but there was a massive topic I wanted to get into, but we not quite got there, and it was your counterpoint for guitar thing. So
Sure.
I think let's just finish off with you. Kind of, I don't know what's coming up next for you, because you just released a counterpoint etudes kind of course tab pack thing, which is great, and everybody should check that out. But like, what's coming? What's coming?
Well, at the moment, my next kind of, I suppose, 6 months really are they're looking quite heavy in terms of a lot of session work, a lot of teaching as well, which seems to be the main thing. I've taken on a lot of students in the past, I suppose, 2 months, and so ordering that properly and really drawing up a syllabus is, for each student has been my main priority. But really, for like personal goals that are away from kind of the business side of music for me, which is really my mainstay there. For me personally, I think I need to be writing more music. I do hope in the next kind of like 2 to 5 years really is to get some recording done. And I suppose it's meeting more players in the scene as well, and trying to establish that. But I'm kind of in the place of thinking, right, I need to start some trio work and see where I can kind of go from there. But yeah, I think for the future is writing more, putting it to a band. I suppose just seeing where it goes from there. And on the course side of things, I'm kind of hoping to take up the idea of explaining what's kind of going on in those pieces of music that I'd created. But because I've been getting quite a few messages from people recently saying, bought the pack, love the music, it's really cool, but I don't really understand how you've come to it, or how you're improvising it, or how you've started on that journey. And I'm realizing that there's information that is not actually out there in a condensed form, or in a way that's like that's not necessarily bite-sized, because it's very dense stuff, but it's people want to know about it, people like the sound of it, and that's really encouraging. So I think when I get the time is going down that route of trying to really explain it to people, I suppose.
Yeah, man. So just to give people a little bit of context, Jack, sorry if I butcher this, but Jack's been studying, I guess, how you can translate Baroque counterpoint music onto guitar, yeah?
That's the one, yeah.
And he made a Sound Slice course with 6, I think, etudes in it that you can download and learn, and it's got tab and finger position and everything you could need, to be honest. And I think it's just one of the most interesting things I've seen lately in guitar, and I'm so excited. Kind of you, man. I'm so excited to see where you take it, especially with improvisation, because I've heard the was it Ted Green? Yeah, Ted Green was very prominent. Yeah, I've heard him doing his Baroque thing, and it's amazing. So it'll be great to hear you doing more. And yeah, it's been great chatting, man. Man, really good fun. I think hopefully people enjoy the chat we just had, and it was definitely like one for the teachers, but also one for the students. Like I think everybody will get something from that. So any final words of wisdom you want to pass on?
Keep curious. Always push for a direction. Don't be satisfied with standing still. Keep curious, keep working, keep being creative. And I suppose like the biggest thing of everything of this podcast today, which, aside from air quotes, obviously, it was just do, and that will satisfy so many areas in your life that are even beyond music. So the philosophy of just do should be your biggest part. Stop thinking, just do.
And on those final words of wisdom from Jack, we finish episode 2 of Sitting In. I hope you enjoyed it. Finally, if you want to leave a review, give us feedback, leave a comment, blah blah blah, do all that, and go and check out our merch store. There's some cool things out there, and I'll see you in episode 3. Adios.